In my 35 years on the bench here in Providence, Rhode Island, I have been moved to tears exactly 3 times in open court. I am not a man who cries easily. My father raised me to be strong, to be steady, to be the kind of person other people could lean on when the weight got too heavy. But on a Monday morning in February, a 10-year-old boy named Thomas walked into my courtroom, stood on his tiptoes to reach the podium microphone, and said something that stopped every single person in that room cold. Subscribe to this channel right now, because what this child did, and what I did in response, is something I will carry with me until my last day on this earth. Let me set the scene for you. February in Providence is not romantic. The streets are gray, the sky is the color of old concrete, and the people who come through my courtroom doors are often carrying the full weight of a New England winter on their shoulders, along with whatever brought them here in the first place. I always try to remember that. I try to remember that the person standing at my podium left their house that morning, found parking, walked through cold air, sat in a waiting area, and finally faced a judge. And all of that costs something, even when the case is small, even when it's just a parking ticket. This case was not just a parking ticket, although it started as one. Leave a comment right now if you've ever done something to protect someone you love, because that is exactly what this story is about. And the person who did it was 10 years old and barely tall enough to be seen over the podium. The defendant on record was listed as Raymond Caruso, 41 years old, 3 outstanding parking violations, 2 from December and 1 from January. $185 total. He had requested a hearing, and he had come in person, which I always appreciate. When people come in person, it tells me something. It tells me they are trying to face what they owe, even if they are not sure yet how to face it. Raymond walked in first. He was a compact man, the kind of build that speaks of physical work, broad through the shoulders, hands that looked like they had been used hard and regularly. He was wearing a clean flannel shirt, the kind you wear when you want to look presentable but don't own a blazer. He had the face of a man who had been worrying for a while, deep lines around the eyes, the particular set of the jaw that I recognize as someone holding something steady through sheer effort of will. And walking beside him, holding his hand, was a boy, small, dark-haired, wearing a Providence Bruins sweatshirt that was slightly too big for him, the sleeves coming down past his wrists. He had his father's eyes, dark, serious, paying attention to everything. He walked the way children walk when they have been told this is important, carefully, quietly, with a gravity that doesn't quite fit their small bodies. His name, I would learn, was Thomas, and from the moment I saw him, something told me, the same instinct that has guided me through 3.5 decades of this work, that Thomas was not here as a spectator. Inspector Quinn caught my eye as they approached the podium, just a glance. But Quinn's glances carry sentences in them, and this one said, "Watch carefully, Judge." I looked at the file in front of me. 3 violations, all in the same residential neighborhood on Cranston Street. December 8th, December 19th, January 4th. No payment, no prior contact with the court. Clean record otherwise. I looked up. "Mr. Caruso," I said. "Good morning. And who do we have with you today?" Raymond looked down at the boy beside him. Something passed across his face. Love, worry, something else I couldn't name yet. "This is my son Thomas, Your Honor. He asked to come with me." "Well, Thomas," I said, and I made sure to look directly at the boy, because children in my courtroom always deserve to be looked at directly. "Good morning to you. You're very welcome here." Thomas looked up at me from beneath the 2 long sleeves of his sweatshirt. He nodded, serious as a small judge himself. Hit that like button right now if you believe children show us the purest form of love, because in about 3 minutes, this little boy is going to do something that will change the entire direction of this case, and nothing in my 35 years could have prepared me for it. I turned to Raymond. "Mr. Caruso, you have 3 violations here. Can you tell me what was going on during December and January?" Raymond shifted his weight, cleared his throat, began to speak, and then Thomas stepped forward. He stepped right up to the podium, stood on his tiptoes, and said in a voice that was trying very hard to be steady, "Your Honor, can I say something?" I looked at this 10-year-old boy. His chin was up, his small hands were gripping the edge of the podium, and his eyes were looking directly at me with the kind of direct, clear, terrified honesty that you only ever see in children and saints. "Of course you can," I said quietly. "It was my fault," Thomas said. "The tickets, it was because of me. My dad was taking me to my doctor appointments and he couldn't find parking and he didn't have enough money for the meters all the time," and his voice wobbled slightly and he pressed forward through it with a determination that broke my heart wide open. "And I don't want him to be in trouble because of me. I want to pay for it. I have $22 saved up." The courtroom went absolutely silent. I mean that literally. In 35 years, I have never heard my courtroom go that quiet. Not the polite, procedural quiet of people waiting for a ruling. This was the silence of an entire room of human beings receiving something they were not prepared for and did not know how to hold. I had to pause. I had to look at my papers for a moment and breathe. I am not ashamed to tell you that. My throat tightened in a way that took genuine effort to manage. I thought of my own children when they were small. I thought of the fierce, irrational, unconditional love of a child for their parent. The kind of love that makes a 10-year-old boy stand up in a courtroom and try to protect his father with $22 and a too-big sweatshirt. What am I going to do with you, Thomas Caruso? What am I going to do? I looked at Raymond. The flannel shirt, the broad shoulders, the face of a man who was working very hard not to fall completely apart at a municipal court podium on a Monday morning in February. Mr. Caruso, I said, and I kept my voice as steady as I could. Is what your son is telling me accurate? Were the violations incurred while taking him to medical appointments? Raymond nodded. Once. It was a small nod, but it carried everything. Yes, Your Honor, he said. His voice was rough. Thomas has a condition, a cardiac condition. He's been having appointments at Hasbro Children's Hospital since October, every couple of weeks, sometimes more often. He paused. The parking near the hospital it's expensive, and sometimes the appointments run late, or they move things around, and I didn't always have enough on me to add more time to the meter. He looked at his son, then back at me. I should have handled the tickets before it got to this. I know that. It's been a hard few months. A cardiac condition, this 10-year-old boy. My chest ached with that information in a way that was immediate and physical and impossible to reason away. Share this video right now, my friends. Share it with every parent you know. Share it with everyone who has ever sat in a hospital waiting room praying for someone they love, because this story is about to go somewhere that I still, months later, find difficult to talk about without feeling it all over again. I looked down at the violation dates. December 8th. I looked at the address on the ticket. Eddy Street, 1 block from Hasbro Children's Hospital. December 19th. Same block. January 4th. Orms Street, the alternate route to the hospital parking structure. Every ticket, every single one, placed within a quarter mile of that hospital. I had been a judge for 35 years. I had also been a father and a grandfather and a man who had faced my own health challenges and understood in a personal, cellular way what it means to be grateful for every ordinary morning. A few years back, I faced some things that made me reconsider what mattered, what really mattered. And sitting on this bench, watching this father and this small boy, I felt that understanding settle over me again like something warm and clear. Let me ask you something, my friends. What is the law for? I mean that genuinely. What is the purpose of the law? I have been asking myself that question for 35 years, and the answer I keep coming back to, the one I believe with everything I have, is this. The law exists to protect people, to create the conditions in which ordinary human life can be lived with dignity and fairness. It is not an end in itself. It is a means. And when the letter of the law and the spirit of the law pull in different directions, it is the job of the person sitting in this chair to find the path that honors both. I turned back to Thomas. He was still standing at the podium, both hands gripping the edge. He had not moved since he finished speaking. He was watching me with those dark, serious eyes, and I could see in them the full weight of what he had done, the courage it had taken, the love behind it, and the very real fear that it might not be enough. Thomas, I said. I leaned forward slightly, the way I do when I want someone to know that what I'm saying is meant only for them, even in a room full of people. I want to ask you something. When you decided to come here today and say what you said, did your dad know you were going to do that? Thomas glanced up at his father, then back at me. He shook his head. No, sir, he said quietly. I looked at Raymond. The expression on his face confirmed it. The particular mix of astonishment and grief and overwhelming love of a parent who has just watched their child do something that renders them momentarily, completely speechless. Your dad didn't ask you to do this, I said to Thomas. You decided on your own. Yes, sir. Why? The question hung in the courtroom air for a long moment. Thomas thought about it, really thought about it, the way children do when they are not performing an answer but finding one. Then he said simply, because he takes care of me, so I wanted to take care of him. My friends, I have been sitting at this bench for 35 years. I have heard thousands upon thousands of statements from this podium. I have heard confessions and excuses and pleas and arguments and everything in between. I want you to understand me when I tell you that what this 10-year-old boy said to me on that Monday morning in February is one of the most profound things I have ever heard spoken aloud in a court of law, because he takes care of me, so I wanted to take care of him. That is not just love. That is the definition of family. That is the entire philosophy of what it means to belong to someone. To owe them not because they demand it, but because love, real love, creates its own obligation. My father would have understood those words completely. He spent 30 years working in a mill so that his children could have options he never had. We never asked him to. He just did it, because that is what love looks like when it puts on its work clothes every morning. Before I tell you what I decided, and I want you to really hear this because the decision I made was not simple, and I thought carefully about every part of it. Subscribe to this channel right now, because what I'm about to do at this bench has been called, by people who've watched Caught in Providence, one of the most memorable moments in the show's history, and I'll let you be the judge of whether they're right. I straightened in my chair. I looked at the file one final time. I looked at Raymond Caruso, this hard-working father in his clean flannel shirt who had been quietly managing an impossible few months and had accumulated $185 in parking tickets that told the entire story of those months without a single word of explanation. And I looked at Thomas, this 10-year-old boy with his $22 and his two long sleeves and his willingness to stand up in a courtroom and try to carry a weight that was never his to carry. "Mr. Caruso," I said, "I'm dismissing all 3 violations. Everyone, dismissed entirely." I heard someone in the gallery exhale, not quite a gasp, but the sound of held breath being released. Inspector Quinn remained still, but I could see the set of his face had changed. I held up my hand because I wasn't finished. "But I want to say something to both of you, not as a judge, as a person." I looked at Raymond first. "You are doing something very hard. You are managing your son's health and your work and your finances and your fear all at the same time. Mostly in silence, mostly alone. I know that because I can see it. And I want you to know, I need you to hear this, that asking for help is not weakness. This city has resources. The hospital has financial assistance programs for families in exactly your situation, including help with transportation and parking costs. Please ask your son's care team about it. Please." Raymond was blinking. His jaw was tight with the effort of holding himself together. Then I turned to Thomas. "Young man," I said, "I want you to put your $22 back in your pocket." I paused, "and I want you to listen to me very carefully because what I'm about to say is the most important thing you're going to hear in a courtroom today." I leaned forward. "What you did this morning, standing up and speaking up for your father, that was one of the bravest things I've ever seen in 35 years on this bench. I want you to remember that. When you are 20 and 30 and 40 years old, I want you to remember that you were 10 years old and you were brave enough to stand up and speak the truth in a room full of strangers because you love your dad." I looked at him steadily. That kind of courage doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from being raised right. It comes from having a father who taught you by example what love looks like. I watched Thomas look at his father. I watched Raymond look at his son. And I watched something pass between them that required no words and needed none. I heard from somewhere in the gallery the quiet sound of someone crying. I didn't look up. I kept my eyes on this father and this boy because that moment belonged to them, and I was not going to dilute it. God bless you, Thomas Caruso. God bless you, Raymond. Take care of each other. Subscribe to this channel, my friends, if this story touched something in you. Because stories like this are why I still come to this bench every morning after 35 years, grateful for every single day I get to do this work. I saw them leave the courtroom together, Thomas's hand back in his father's, the 2 long sleeves of the sweatshirt, Raymond's broad shoulders which, and I noticed this, were slightly less rigid than when he'd walked in, like something had been set down. Not everything, but something. Quinn came over to my bench a few minutes later between cases and stood there for a moment without saying anything. Then he said quietly, "That boy." Just that. 2 words. Quinn at his most eloquent. "Yeah," I said, "that boy." About 3 months later, May, when Providence had finally remembered that warmth was an option, my clerk brought me a drawing. It had arrived in a regular envelope addressed to the courthouse, care of Judge Caprio. It was done in colored pencil, the way children draw with total commitment to color, no apology for staying inside or outside the lines. It showed a courtroom, a judge's bench, a small figure at a podium, and above the small figure, in careful 10-year-old handwriting, the words, "The judge was nice." Underneath the drawing, in adult handwriting that I recognized immediately, Thomas's cardiology team cleared him last month. His heart is strong. Thank you for seeing us. Raymond Caruso. I keep that drawing in my desk drawer, right in the front where I see it first every morning. Let me tell you something, my friends. I have received letters and cards and messages from people all over the world since Caught in Providence started sharing moments from this courtroom. And every one of them matters to me, every single one. But that drawing in colored pencil, those 5 words, "The judge was nice," that is the review that means the most to me. Because it came from a 10-year-old who had no agenda, no strategy, no performance, just a child reporting back honestly on what he had experienced. I try to be nice, I try to be fair, I try to treat every person who stands at that podium the way I would want to be treated if our positions were reversed. That is what my father taught me. That is what this work demands. That is what justice, real justice, actually looks like when you get close enough to see it clearly. The law is not a wall, it is a door. And my job, the job I have been given the privilege of doing for 35 years in this city that I love, is to make sure that door opens for everyone. The ones in flannel shirts, the ones in designer sneakers, the ones in Sunday dresses, the ones in 2 big sweatshirts with $22 in their pockets and enough love in their hearts to walk into a courthouse and try to save their father. Every one of them, every single one. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done? Would you have dismissed those fines? Would you have handled it differently? I want to hear from you. I always want to hear from you. And share this video with a parent. Share it with a child. Share it with anyone who needs to be reminded today that ordinary people, in ordinary circumstances, are capable of extraordinary acts of love. Thomas Caruso taught me that on a gray Monday morning in February, and I am grateful, truly, deeply grateful, that I was there to receive the lesson. God bless you all. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And as for what walked into my courtroom next, my friends, I promise you, after everything I have just told you, nothing could have prepared me for that either. But that is a story for another day.